the way we do marketing and sales is very, very high level. And so it's like we kind of added this new technology to this business. And that business went from like 50,000 a month to 3 million a month in 14 months, which again, just so you know, don't grow stuff too fast. Like you got to pay off a lot of debt after that.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Masters of Fate podcast. I have Cole Gordon here again. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey going from burnt out sales rep to multiple 8-figure sales empire. And let's just hop right into it, dude. So right from the beginning, you were switching from traffic and funnels to moving into entrepreneurship. And this was only like 5 years ago. Yeah, just take us back to that moment.
Yeah, so almost 6 years ago, I think. Yeah, about 5-6 years. So, well, if we were going to start there, I was doing really well in sales. Just kind of in a position where I didn't feel like I was growing anymore. There was definitely, in hindsight, a lot of room for growth I could have had, but I didn't see a vision for it was the main thing. Is I just kind of felt like I was at the top of the game with a top company in my mind, and I wasn't really learning anything new, and I didn't know where else to go to learn anything new. So what happened is I kind of just emotionally burned out of the position for a few different reasons. Took some time off. A lot of people were telling me, especially when I went out to visit you and Brad, just like, dude, you're really good at this. You need to get into sales. Like, you really help people. I was like, okay, I could easily make, I could easily make like 30 grand a month, kind of replace my income, or 40 grand a month, replace my income, and probably have a more chill life and less stress. So that sounds pretty good. And then, so then I did a launch. And, what helped me too is, I had an agency before. There was a marketing agency. I was also very much a student of this space. I learned a lot. I always would go through content and this and that. And so, I really was like a studious person of the space, and I learned a lot of marketing skills even before I launched. So I was, even as a salesperson, I was a pretty good marketer. So when I did launch, I did pretty well. Really built some momentum. I did like 70-ish K in like 2 days. And then obviously took the next like 45 days to fulfill. Launched again in January with a ton of momentum. Did like 270,000. Took another month to fulfill. Then I tried to launch again in March, but COVID happened. And so along these like launches, like my first launch, and I'm not even a big proponent of launches, by the way, but I think I just had so much demand. It just kind of made sense for me. And I don't know, even going back, I don't know if I would have done it that way. But one thing that was so nice about it is it made me a lot of money. And then I was able to like build out my infrastructure over the course of like 45 days without having to worry about any marketing and sales. That was actually the nicest part. Ongoing, it's not my favorite model, by the way. But my first hypothesis during the first one was like doing like sales coaching. So I was like, I'll do like sales coaching for entrepreneurs and sales reps. I mean, that's like it's kind of the easiest thing to fulfill. And it was like, I knew I could get a result, very straightforward. Like I was very advanced compared to the people I was enrolling. So I was able to help a lot of people. Then I kind of realized with that, I should kind of make this more about like sales teams and like helping them with their sales team. So then that's when I did the 270. I had some individuals, but a lot of teams. And I was like, okay, this team thing is better. They're more willing to kind of like keep paying, and they have higher LTV. They can pay more. And so I did that. And then as I was even as I was doing that launch, and then especially like the couple of weeks and months afterwards, I was like, okay, man, the biggest thing people want to know on the sales call is, can I help them find good sales reps? It's like, dude, I'm getting like DMs every other, because I had all this like Facebook, social media momentum. And so I was like, man, like I'm getting like a DM like every other day asking, do you know where I can find good sales reps? My clients are asking this. So I was like, there's only one person at the time doing sales recruiting for our industry. And they were also the only person who I saw running paid ads, which was kind of like a sign of success for me. but I thought the model in which they were doing could be improved significantly. I was like, it's one of those things where I was like, they're doing okay, but when you look at it, you're like, man, I would just do it so much better. That's kind of like a good sign you're onto the right thing in any business. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to bite the bullet and figure out the sales recruiting thing. I don't know how the F I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to figure it out. And then, so that's what I launched in March. But, unfortunately, that was like the day I launched was like the day the United States got shut down. So it was like, I made like a post, and I think I made a post like later that day. Then I realized, yeah, I should probably suspend it. Like, I'm like talking to crickets right now. Like, it was like, I didn't even get like likes, it was like, I was like, am I shadow banned, or is it just COVID? It was just COVID. And so I kind of like scrapped it, and then just sort of kept posting content. And I was like, I don't know what the hell is going to happen with this. Like, what's going on? And then, I think around like May was shit. That was March. So then I think around April, I kind of picked up some sales. And then June is when, like, I remember just like, holy crap. Like, I just made one post one time, and I made like 170 grand from that post directly over the next couple of days. It was just crazy. I had a great organic, great momentum. And I was like, okay, like this offer freaking hits. Like, this is insane. Like, this is like obviously a big thing. And I know that seems obvious now, like, duh. But like, a lot of people have tried to do it too, since I've had a lot of success. But, you got to remember, like, back then, there's only like one guy doing it. So it was kind of like, I don't know, like, why isn't there more? If this is, it was right time, right place. This is when high ticket was getting big. And during COVID, like a lot of stuff, like, a lot of online kind of like a lot of our industry is really propped up by the B2C type of businesses, which are like health coaching, relationships, and like some sort of like start a business, right? Mm-hmm. Or like very initial kind of business help, business growth course stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So like, obviously COVID like basically increased the velocity into the market for those types of things like tremendously. So all these businesses are going, so like they need salespeople. And then also like, the low ticket stuff wasn't working anymore. So like there was a huge transition in model from a lot of like the old guard, if you want to call it that. And so it's like, man, I just totally hit right place, right time. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is like growing so fast. And so like, I probably was doing like 100 to 200 grand a month by myself with 2 employees, an EA and a coach during the summer of 2020. And then, and I'm like, okay, I got to figure out this like sales recruiting thing. So we hire a head of recruiting for that. She was like phenomenal for helping me build the department originally. And then, hired, obviously, Mitchell. So it was like, this is kind of like the future CEO of the company. So it was like, okay, hiring him. And then, man, like, it's like those 2 hires, especially, and just really like cementing in a good kind of foundational team. It was like ridiculous. As soon as I was like, got off the phone, got a little bit of ads going, and still like powered down the organic. It was like, and then we, added in a more of a traditional back end. It was like 200 to 350 to 450 to 550 to 650 to like, then later that year in March of 2021. So early the next year, we did like 800 grand. And by that time we had launched RCA. So it was like 1.1. And I was like, oh my God, we broke $1 million a month. And, we were not stopping there. It was like by that time, or not even by that time, by like June, we had hit 2 million a month. And then by like the end of the year, we were at like almost 3 million a month. And this is all like cash. Revenue, I don't know, like 4 million a month or something, but nobody counts that. So it was just like insane. It was basically 100K a month to 1.8 million, or not 1.8, 2.5 to 2.8 million a month within 18 months. So it was like ridiculous. Obviously, just so everybody knows, when you scale that, unless you are like a G and you have done this many, many times, and you build the right infrastructure from the start, and you really recruit a lot of leadership and build a lot of team early on, most likely a growth rate like that in any business, depending on what the business is, you know, I mean, if you have a mobile app, that might not be the case, but in a service business, you know, I've done this twice now with growing shit too fast. You were in for a lot of pain because like you're going to pay off a lot of debt operationally, all sorts of shit, like all this stuff that you just outgrew. So that sucked. And so like the whole next year was just like kind of, okay, like this was the wrong leader here. We need to rebuild this department. This was the wrong thing. Client success needs entirely redone. Okay, the marketing needs entirely redone. Oh, okay, like we need a new sales manager. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. It was like, so we ended up like, you know, crazy growth rate, then just complete plateau the next year. Pretty common in my experience, but it was painful was the issue. It was like, it really was like not a fun way to run a business, to be honest. But it just is what it is. You know, I've done it twice now, and man, when you're good, like I am good at growing stuff, very like it's my skill for sure. And and man, it just when you get something moving really quickly, it is just hard to have the discipline to make it stop. I think I finally learned the lessons now. But yeah. So, anyways, the story continues. So we kind of were plateaued around that. Then we grew both of our two sales companies because we had like one for certifying sales reps, RCA, I mentioned that, and then one for the B2B. So we grew those to about $4 million a month cash. And then at that point, we got this great idea. Sarcastically, it was a bad idea. That I was going to make all these changes and move this stuff around. Then, you know, a lot of my team was seeing what the Hormozis was doing. I was seeing it and it was like, oh my gosh, like they're so smart. And so, and, you know, we had so many clients where I was like, you know, we're not going to be them. I'm not going to get famous and be able to do what they do. But, you know, like we could do done for you sales and like take equity in companies. So we took on like about 10 partners over the course of the next 6 months. It's not even the partners. It's just like, the model just didn't work for a lot of reasons. I could go into that if you wanted to, but like, you know, all the reasons why I thought it wouldn't work were the reasons it didn't work. And I was very hesitant to get into it. And then eventually I kind of just convinced myself to do it. The team around me was very convinced it would work. And it's just the whole info partnership publishing model. I've very rarely seen anybody do it super successfully to where I'm like very impressed. And just info businesses in general, they're just, it's tough to create a portfolio of businesses like that. Like it's so founder centric and expert centric. So a lot of it's on them and, you know, there's all sorts of stuff. And I don't necessarily think it's the founder's issue either. I just think it's the model. Like I found that, you know, we were really working really hard and a lot of people got really great results, you know, doubling, tripling, quadrupling companies, etc. It's just that like we found ourselves in a position where it was like, holy shit, like this is really fucking hard. We're working really, really hard. This same amount of effort, we could get another company that we own 100% of to do like 3 million a month. Right. So it's like kind of, what are we doing? So we sort of had to unwind that down. And, but because I had to reallocate all sorts of resources into that, we kind of took our eye off the ball with the two main companies, which, you know, focus, you know, it's like, you hear that all the time, you should do it. So it's like kind of lost focus and those retracted a little bit in 2023. And so not to a point where it was like devastating. It's just like, they just kind of went down a little bit. And so, and now really they've gone back up since we've pivoted. Now, one of the cool things about that was one of the companies that, one of the 10 was a chain of health clinics. And that company was a little bit interesting because, you know, with an info company, it's kind of like, okay, the max we could probably get from this in a lot of cases is like $1 million to $3 million a month, unless, you know, it's some unicorn like Cardone's doing, you know, 9 figures, but Tony Robbins is doing 9 figures. But I can't really make the expectation that, you know, I don't know, you know, even the founders, I don't know if this person wants to be the next Tony Robbins. It's not even in the kind of roadmap, right? So, but this other chain of clinics, on the other hand, I was like, this could be like a legitimate $1 billion opportunity. And certainly a 9-figure opportunity. Like this is a real scalable type of business. And it's just like in a different space, which makes what we do really valuable because it's not already done in that space. You know, Abraham says when you take kind of something that works in one industry and then you apply it to another, you get like an exponential effect. And I'm sure other people have quotes around that as well. So It was basically like we kind of added, I know we're not like tech, right? But it's like the way we do marketing and sales is very, very high level. And so it's like we kind of added this new technology to this business. And that business went from like 50,000 a month to 3 million a month in 14 months, which again, just so you know, don't grow stuff too fast. Like you got to pay off a lot of debt after that. So it's like, now you got to kind of fix things retroactively, which is harder than fixing it and doing it right from the beginning with slower growth. But that was an explosive growth rate. So that is a cool thing that is going on. And so that's kind of like, that business is kind of like a sandbox of, we get to implement everything we've learned. If you think about it this way, when you play, like, the sales recruiting company that we work with mainly markets to agencies, SaaS companies, coaches, consultants, course creators, that type of crowd, right? These are really savvy people. Like this is a high sophistication audience. So like I have to be 10 out of 10 with a marketing campaign or sales process to get good numbers from that. If I take that same skill set and apply it to like B2C with a good product that's riding a new wave with a new technology, which is what we were doing with these clinics, it was like crazy. I could get like $5 calls. Like it was nuts. I'd never seen anything like it before. It was insane. It was insane. And so it's kind of like a way to like really use a lot of the skills we built to do something a little bit more scalable. But I don't spend the majority of my time there. I spend the majority of the time in my main company still. It's kind of my main platform company, if you understand what that means. And that kind of brings us to where we are now. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. There's so much to unpack there. I kind of want to skip over the first part, like getting past 100K. You can do organic or you can do the short form funnel like you teach, and you just have to not suck and have a good offer.
Yeah, not
so
suck.
So just don't suck. And when you're at 100K scaling to, did you say 1.8 million in 18 months?
No, it says like 2.5 to 2.8. I don't know, something around there. Definitely 2.5. I don't know. I never really, it's not like I really look at the spreadsheet and figure it out. Like I don't care that much, to be honest. But
so you said
it was
that
something like that. Yeah.
Everything was like kind of starting to break with the infrastructure and with the team. If you had to go back a little bit, or in your boardroom with your boardroom clients, what do you advise that they do when they're looking to scale fast? What infrastructure do they need to have in place? All of that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's different for every business, right? And it's tough. Like, what would we go back and change? Well, like, a lot of this stuff, it's not like I'm like, wow, you're so stupid. I mean, some of it's like, wow, really, dude, that was a dumb mistake. So yeah, like some of it's like, I wish I just would have slowed down and thought about it more with a lot of things like that. There's a lot of things where I'm like, wish I would have slowed down and just thought about it more, So there's a lot of things like that. And a lot of stuff, it's like, how would I have known type stuff. Mm-hmm. So, man, I think the easiest way, let me try to think through everything that has gone wrong from scaling stuff too fast.
And it could be, what are the lessons that you've learned from that scaling, and what have you put in place to make sure that wouldn't happen again?
Well, I don't know if it's not going to happen again. I've not scaled fast successfully. So, I could make the same mistake 3 times. Who knows? Hopefully not. But, it's really not even that hard. It's just like this. I mean, it's not like you accidentally scale, especially in a service-based business where you're like, have a sales team. Like, it's not like something went viral and then you're out of control. Like that's different, and you got to just deal with it, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. But that's not us. Like we were like running ads, so with both companies. So it's not like we accidentally did it. No, we did it on purpose. Okay. So look, what are all the things? I mean, I'll just go through everything. So like, number one is, and again, like part of it is you're just never going to get away from some of this stuff, but like client success. So, almost with everything I've done, you kind of build an initial client, like the client success doesn't get built premature. Like it doesn't get built before. So you're kind of like growing and you're sort of like building the client success to try to keep up. And there's all sorts of issues with that because essentially there's so much urgency around getting the right people, especially the early, like foundational couple first people, because like you need those people right now. And you scaled so fast, your hair's on fire. Like you don't do as many interviews, you don't have as much, you don't really think it through, you don't do as much due diligence, da. So like there's a problem there. On top of that, especially with client success in any business, there is a degree of like, it is going to break and you are going to have to kind of redo it at certain stages. I just will say it's easier to kind of like, that's going to happen inevitably. It's easier, however, to fix stuff when you're not like if you should have fixed it at 500 grand a month, but you scaled so fast that now you have to fix it at 2 million a month, you're in for a lot more issues than if you would have done it a little bit sooner and it could have revealed itself a little sooner, right? It's harder to do it later on. So, that's a big one. But part of it is like, man, it's hard to know exactly what your client success needs to look like until you have some scale. And like, because stuff breaks and then your customers will inform you on what's broken and then you will fix it. That's what you're supposed to do. And so, that's been a big one. And it's not to say that our customer service or product was like horrible. Like we always had really good reviews, but is it as good as it is now? No. And is it as good as it's going to be in 12 months? No. Like it's only just gets better, but these things take time and like iterations. You got to spend a lot of, it's like, it's not like a new marketing campaign where you launch and it's like, whoa, we're all this new revenue, right? It's, this stuff, it's like, you got to iterate and it does take time. Another big one is compliance. Like, look, like obviously there's different risk levels of different people. And when it comes to compliance, they should talk to an attorney. What I can say is obviously your risk level is going to go up as the more revenue you do, the more customers that you have, obviously. Right. And so, in almost everything I've ever done, it's like, we've kind of been like, oh, like let's worry about compliance, like kind of like once we get going a little bit more, like let's kind of start a little bit looser, get some traction, then like we can kind of reel it back in. I don't necessarily think that's a bad approach. However, the problem is like in everything I've ever done, it has been so explosive that like then trying to reel back in compliance when you have 100 employees and you have infrastructure and tighter profit margins, it makes it so much harder. It's like, I wish I just would have known what compliance was from the beginning. But then again, like the first time I did this, how would I have known? The second time I should have known, that time I should have known because I knew I was already pretty well versed in compliance with that. So that's a problem. What else? Obviously your client success infrastructure, and just certain leaders, like, again, some of this stuff I wouldn't know. Like, I can't blame myself for, let's say there's situations where I promoted the wrong person into a position or had the wrong leader in place. And there's certain situations where, how would I have known? I've just never hired that before. It's like, you kind of got to make the mistake to know. But then there's other times where it's like, man, I've had enough experience to where like, there's somebody I maybe needed to let go 6 months ago or like have more difficult conversations with. And I've waited. And because I've put it off, now like the issue is blown up into more than it needs to be. Another big learning lesson is like, man, and it's tough when you have so much to do as like a CEO and there's so much going on and you're like, but like, I wish in a lot of cases, it's like, just way more proactive with feedback of where people are at and just being super upfront and like performance improvement plans and like stuff like that is very, very, very key. And so, sometimes it's like you kind of get caught in running your business and you're like, this person's just kind of not doing their job, but you don't really like, it's like you need to take time to really invest in that person, coach them, give them the feedback and just be proactive with it. Because then if it goes to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, this person's got to go and you haven't even given them any constructive feedback, first of all, that's probably your fault beginning, but second of all, it's like, they're going to get blindsided and then you have the whole issue. So, there's all sorts of issues like that. It stinks to trying to have to fixing something like, I'll give you a great example. If you have a new process you need to roll out in client success, it's easier to do that when you have 2 CSMs instead of 12. Like, I mean, it's common sense, but like it becomes really tough if like you already have 12 CSMs and there's a culture set in and all of this stuff. So that's why it's like more predictable,
Get the
slower,
foundation,
less ego, less emotional, less like, oh my God, you've got to prove something type of energy, you know. And I think what happens with most entrepreneurs is they always have that, especially with guys, you know, who are younger. You always have that, and then you kind of learn the lessons a couple of times. Then you sort of like are like, okay, you know, I want something that's you know, yeah, I have big goals still, but I want to do it the right, you know, I want to do it the right way. I want to do it predictable, stuff like that. Hope that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, nailing down the foundations for client success. You're going to be iterating all the time, though. Compliance, which honestly, that's great for anybody out there that's looking to scale super fast. And then training the team and making sure that you have performance plans in place. That's good. So let's say coaching industry, somebody's looking to scale from 100K to $1 million a month. What are your 3 key tips for them, or mindset things? What are 3 key things that would move the needle the most for them in the short amount of time we have here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of phases, right? And I think we went through this before, but we didn't complete it. Mm-hmm. It's like, so the phase 1, and I have to kind of repeat phase 1 because some people can get to 100 grand a month without phase 1. And so really phase 1 is like, you need a validated product that, you know, people who don't know you, they're not your friends, they're not referrals, they're not like lovingly followers of yours, will buy, right? Now, this is an exception. There is instances where like you have such a big organic audience or following that, you know, you don't have to necessarily have the best cold product market fit, because, you know, if you got freaking like 500K views a YouTube video and you release 2 YouTube videos a week and you got 2 million subscribers, you're going to have a lot of leeway with like, you know, the offer that you come up with is going to be, you're going to have a lot more lax than somebody who's got to make paid ads work. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. Kind of obvious, but just generally, let's say somebody they're not famous. Okay. You have to, number 1, have a validated offer. You have to know people beyond your warm network will buy this for the most part. Right. Mm-hmm. So usually that's like something to where it's specific. You're essentially solving a specific problem for a specific person, a specific way. That's kind of like the easiest way to explain it very simply. There's more to it, but then obviously what you have to have is a predictable, repeatable, reliable way to generate traffic, interest for the offer, and then a predictable, repeatable way to convert that interest into a front-end customer, right? That could be a variety of different ways. But like foundationally, you kind of need those 3 things. It's like the validated offer, that, and that. And this is kind of if, again, you're not like got this massive, crazy audience, you know, then the pathway changes a little bit, but it's still relatively the same. So that's kind of like phase 1. Now, the reason I say that is because you could be 100 grand a month, and, you know, there's certain people, they may have an Instagram following of 25K, but they're really good at Instagram and it's a quality following, and they can kind of get to 100 grand a month with that. So, but if you're really wanting to go to $1 million a month, what I've seen in this industry in most cases is, even if you do have a decent audience, you sort of have to eventually get some sort of cold acquisition to work, which is multiple ways, but generally I see advertising be the main way. Okay. Mm-hmm. So first, you kind of need that foundational pillar. Once you have that, usually it's like you have everything. Like that's where most of the innovation happens. Like you're trying to figure out product market. Like that was me trying to figure out the sales team, sales recruiting, sales coaching thing. So it's like I kind of figured that out. I was like, okay, this sales recruiting is like, it hits the nerve. You know, you want to find that. And then, you know, I got some ads working, and then I knew sales. So it was pretty easy for me to systematize the sales process, remove myself. So it's like once I had those pieces in place, then it's like really you don't need to innovate much more. It's just fuel on the fire. But the next thing that happens in kind of phase 2 is that you need to really iterate your product. Because like once you do get something where you can like spend more on ads, hire a couple more salespeople, and like you're going to get a big growth, it's like you'll go from 50 to 100 to 200 to 300. And then I know that sounds like it's fast because you're doubling, tripling, whatever. You know, that's not going from 100 grand a month to 2.5 in, you know, a year and a half. Yeah. So that growth in this industry is usually relatively reasonable. But what will happen is, especially from like 100 to 200, 100 to 300, a lot of times it's like your product and whatever kind of breaks, right? And so that time is like really where you do have to do a little product reinvention. And it's kind of like, okay, what's version 2 of this product? How's the client success going to work? What's the client journey? Like you kind of got to like really nail that down. Okay. Then what, so, you know, and this is still you and maybe a salesperson, or heck, you could even be on the calls yourself, and you got a media buy. Like you're running a pretty lean team at this point still, even at a multiple seven figure company. Now, once you get the product like system really built out to where like, okay, I could put the fuel on the fire and this will scale without killing me. Then really all it is from 200 grand a month to $1 million a month is just talent acquisition. I mean, that's really all it is, right? Like the first step is obviously you're going to be the sales manager and you got to hire more salespeople. You're also going to be the client success director. You got to hire more client success people along that. And those are the two things that kind of will function. And then you're going to spend more on ads. But those are the two main levers, is like, you got to hire more salespeople, get them into KPI. Then you got to get the CSMs to fulfill all the clients the salespeople are bringing on. That's kind of like the two main performance divisions, so to speak. But then along the way, it's like, you might go from running all the ads yourself to where you use an agency, or maybe if you do it in house, okay, you run all the ads yourself. You might get like a media buyer and a video editor, right? So like you might add a little bit on the marketing team, and then you'll start to add a little bit more on your finance team, and a little bit more. You're going to need to get some lawyers and stuff. So like you find a legal firm that you like, and then you add a little bit more on your operations team. But those teams will still usually be relatively lean. And so, you know, you might go from just having a bookkeeper to like now you have just a controller, right? And that controller does your payroll, your HR, some COO level activities and some CFO level activities, but they're not really a full CFO yet because they don't have this team yet. And then same thing with ops. Like you have a lead ops person who kind of manages a couple of VAs and whatever. And then you probably still manage the marketing team, and you have, you know, some people. So again, phase 3 is kind of talent acquisition. Now, phase 3 has 2 parts. First, you're kind of like the full-time manager for your business, right? So you're sort of the CEO, you're the sales manager, you're the client success director, you oversee the marketing, and it's like, this is what I do. I did like everything, you know? And that's great, but obviously it only works for so long. And then so the next phase is you sort of have to learn how to acquire talent and also raise up leaders. Now, this is what I would say, if you really want to know what allowed me to go so quickly, this is what it was. It's like I was just able to attract really good leaders into the company, whether they were kind of homegrown or they came in as a leader or whatever. I was able to do this consistently, and I've still been able to do it pretty well, thankfully. And so this is going to be a huge driver of growth, but like you really need that one person who can manage a team, you know, manage a team of 8 to 12 people, or even recruit and build a new department, whatever it is. But you need to raise up these leaders or acquire these leaders in some way, shape, or form. And so you really go from like it's like a flat organization where it's like you and everybody, to like now you're really the CEO. And yeah, you might still wear some hats here and there, but okay, now you get a client success director. Now eventually you get a sales manager, you know, basic stuff. But like the real hurdle for people is you have to become the type of person that really great leaders want to work for. That's probably the biggest hurdle for people, I'm going to be quite frank, is like, they're like, man, how do I attract great leaders? I'm like, well, why would they want to work for you? You know, it's like a hard piece of feedback to give people. You know, I'm like, you're just not good enough yet. Like somebody who like the leaders who work for me wouldn't work for you. I'll tell you that. I don't care. Even if you pay them double, they wouldn't. You know, you kind of got to be the type of person who they want to learn from and get led from, and be able to really cast a great vision. You know, it's these types of skills. They're not rocket science, but it takes a lot of interpersonal development to have them. So you have to have that. And some of these people might start as team leads, and then they eventually kind of go to managers. You can, again, like sometimes it's not a light switch, it's a volume knob. So they might start as a sales rep, and then a sales team lead, and then sales manager. That could work. Or you find a sales manager from the outside, let them sell for a couple of months, then finally move them up. There's a lot of varieties you could do. And in some way, shape, or form, you need to kind of eventually build an executive team. Now, by the time you do that, you should be at $1 million a month. You know, like if you have a full executive team and you're not at 8 figures in this industry with this type of business model, coaches, kind of weird. Like I see it sometimes where it's like, yeah, I got a full executive team and the revenue is like 200 grand a month. I'm like, I was doing 200 grand a month with 2 employees. So there's fundamentally something wrong. And I'm not saying you should be able to do 200 grand a month with only 2 people. I was a little bit of an anomaly because I was able to sell at a really high price point. I would close like 70% of people. I also was able to upsell my customers myself into a back end and retain. So I had huge LTVs. But, it's like generally you can get to like 300 to 500 with kind of the flat organization in most businesses. And then as you start to build some leaders, that's kind of what allows you to get to $1 million a month. I mean, it's pretty simple. At a certain point, what I've noticed is, I mean, you can kind of just add on more and more and more and more. But at a certain point, you do get some diminishing returns. And at that point, what you may need to do, especially if you're paid advertising driven, is you kind of need to diversify your front ends. So you really need a good back end, right? That's kind of part of getting to $1 million a month too, is you really got to start to add in a back end service, increase LTV, get some people who upsell into the back end, and then guess what? Want to stay in the back end and renew for a second, third, fourth year. Like we have people who've been in for 4 years. So you need to nail that down. But also, you're only going to have one back end, but you can kind of have different front ends. And the way I explain the front ends is it's not starting a new company. That's what people want to do. It's like you want to sell the same front end product, but you want to kind of find a different way to sell it, right? So this could be adding diversifying a traffic channel. It could be like if you study what I'm doing, it's pretty obvious that you'll notice like I have 2 front end main funnels of my company. So like that's kind of what I'm talking about. And then I could also run those on different channels. So that kind of helps diversify the lead flow. And at a certain point, you may even want to have like one funnel go to one sales team, one funnel go to another sales team. They both have sales managers, and they go to a CRO. So like that's kind of the structure that we built in other companies. Like for instance, in the clinic company, there's 3 front ends, 3 sales managers, and 1 CRO. So that's the structure. And essentially that kind of allows for really fast growth, but you need great talent to pull that off. Like you really need great talent. That's the big, like you can't just like if I had unlimited talent, I'd have 10 front ends, it'd be super, super easy. The main thing is, even for me, and I'm good at talent, it's really tough to find like the one person who can kind of take that new profit division and run with it. So really, like at the end of the day, because as soon as you have the marketing skill set, you have the marketing skill set. The main bottleneck really beyond 10 million to 20, 30, 40, 50 million, 100 million, I'm sure, is really just talent acquisition. I mean, brand is another one. Like if you can pull off what Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins have pulled off, obviously look at them. They've done some pretty big revenues. That's a lot of because of the brand, the organic traffic. Russell Brunson, same thing. Like they do so much money just with info, and it's like through a couple of events and traffic. I mean, it's not like they're like got a big sales team, and I don't know, they probably do, but like it's not probably primarily driven from that. They get a lot of web traffic, they have book buy, so there's stuff like that you can do as well. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's no one way, but that's kind of like hopefully a good summary for most people.
Yeah, let's say somebody is scaling and they're looking for their first like lead on their team that can help with some of the thinking, help take over a department. What do you recommend around that? When to do it, how to hire that first person that takes some of the thinking instead of all the doing?
Yeah, well, it just depends. So when to do it is completely contextual. Like it really, one person should really not have more than 8 to 10 direct reports. And like, maybe you could max it out at 12, and it's just kind of not ideal, but it is what it is. And look, I probably had more than 12 at a certain point, and like I got through it. It's not the end of the world, but like the general number is like 8 to 10 in most positions. Maybe in certain ones it's 12, but generally it's like 8 to 10. So that's kind of the max direct report somebody can handle. So if you're kind of like, let's say you have the flatline organization and you're the CEO, you manage everybody. It's like once you kind of get to 8 to 10, like you sort of need some help. And so you got to look towards number one, like what's the thing that you want to get off your plate the most? And you feel like this is the easiest to hire for. and it also isn't a constraint of the growth in the business. Because you might think you want to really hire what's the constraint in the company, but I wouldn't think that way. Like if the constraint's sales, but like client success is easier, like I'm gonna do client success first, so I can focus more on the constraint a little bit longer, until I hire that one. So that's a consideration. But also, it's like sometimes you just really, like for me, also a couple situations was I found the right person very early on, and I knew it was the right person. And I might have only had 2 sales reps, but I was like, man, this person's the right person. So I'm just gonna promote them now, because there's no point in waiting. Like this person already has brought it up, they want it, they have the vision for it, etc. So I guess it's if you found the right person, or kind of when you get to this point where your direct reports are maxing out, you kind of got to start to figure out which departments to delegate. The obvious ones is like, and at first you really should, if you're doing all the finances, like get that off your plate. If you're doing all the operations, get that off your plate. The next one is like, you should have, if you're doing some coaching or fulfillment, like you can really get a lot of help with CSMs, and then obviously getting the sales off your plate, then having a media buyer or somebody do the button pushing on the marketing side. You can still do strategy. So that's kind of like the first level. Then when you're managing all of those people, I mean, look, a controller is not that hard to manage. An ops person is not that hard to manage. Who manages your ops people? So usually there's client success, sales, and marketing. And usually it's like, I recommend, at least for me, I got client success off of my plate from a managerial perspective. Not to say I wasn't involved. I'm still involved to this day. But, like a lot of times the recruiting, hiring, interviewing, the one-on-ones, the team meetings, and being able to have to be on every single team meeting, it's like just kind of getting some help with that. You can still be involved and be on 2 or 3 meetings a week. I highly recommend that. But that's a big difference than having to do, 10 one-on-ones for that team now. Does it make sense? So like just getting a little bit of help. You can still be involved. You just need help. And then the manager does that. And then you kind of move the sales, and, sales is last for a lot of people. And for me, it's been one I recommend generally to be last, because it's in this industry, it can be hard to find. But then eventually you get somebody there. Now you mentioned kind of like promoting them to team lead, et cetera. There's different ways you could do it. So you can kind of acquire the talent. So you can bring in somebody who already has the skill and kind of like place them in, or you can sort of grow it, right? So like you can develop it or you can acquire it. Now, if you develop it, it's pretty simple. Like you identify, I think I have a superstar. This person probably already has the vision for it. It's like you can kind of fit their vision within your vision. And it's sort of the volume knob, not a light switch approach. What you don't want to do is you don't want to say, okay, great. Well, hey, you're now the manager. I got other shit to do. Good luck. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's basically what 99% of people do with their first manager, especially with sales, because sales management takes so much time. They finally get a sales manager and they're like, all right, F this. I'm going to focus on the rest of this business. You got this. I'll check in once a week. Not going to work. What you want to do is you want to kind of volume knob it. So it's like you have a rep. You think this person has potential. Okay, you make them a team lead. What does that mean? Team lead is basically, for sales at least, it can be a little bit different for the other positions. For sales, in my experience, it's kind of like the tryout position for the manager. Okay. So it's where like, hey, you're just going to spend 80% of your time selling still, but we'll pay you a small base and you're going to do these activities once a week. And you really got to define what those activities are. It's more about like defining the activities. You can't really hold them responsible to any team KPIs, because at the end of the day, they're still selling. And like, if it comes between, like if they're at the end of the week or the end of the month, we're at May 30th, right? So the end of the month, and they're behind on their projections, and they got to choose between coaching their teammates or making some deals, like they're just going to make some fucking deals. Like, so it doesn't put them in a position to really be a good manager, but you can give them like a list of like, do this amount of call reviews, have a couple one-on-ones with these people, and you can review it and coach them. And it kind of helps them sort of try out for the position, and also help you out with some, like, if you got a new guy, they can ramp the new guy, stuff like that. And then that should give you a good feel over the course of like 2 months if you have the right person. Then you can promote them to manager, and still like now, okay, they're not on calls and they can do the one-on, like maybe you give them, instead of you doing all the one-on-ones every single week, it's every other week. So they do every other week, you do every other week, right? Or maybe you have them do weekly and you do once a month, right? You still want to kind of like you don't want to just go away. You kind of want to gradually go away. So it's like a lot of times like the basic interviews, ramping new reps, doing a lot of, tedious stuff. You can give that to them right away. And then, some like one-on-one stuff like that, you kind of gradually step away. The one thing that, so at first, like still stay on all the sales meetings. And this goes for any department. I'm just using sales. You stay in all the sales meetings. So you still run them, but they do everything else management-wise. So now you got your sales management time from like 10, 20 hours a week down to like an hour a day. Pretty cool. Okay. And then, you might give them Fridays. And then you give them Fridays and Wednesdays. And then you give them Fridays, Wednesdays, and Tuesdays. And then you give them everything but Monday. And then, long term, you can stay on. Like, I think as a CEO, like one of the best things you can do is rotate, on Mondays and Wednesdays, you can be on the sales meetings. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you can be on the client success meetings. And then you throw in an operations finance meeting somewhere in there and 2 marketing meetings a week in there too. So you're around. Because once you leave a team meeting as a CEO, what I have found is you really lose touch with that department generally, right? Now, if you have a really experienced leader in there with a good relationship with, it can be okay. And but a lot of people just move it too fast. So you kind of need to just gradually do it. Same thing goes with client success in the other departments. I will say team leads work a little bit better in those departments. A team lead in sales is basically worthless. They're not going to help your team. It's really a tryout. But a client success team lead, a little bit different. Like they can actually put a dent in stuff. And so like you can assign them more and get more out of that. Same with the other, like operations team lead. Like, yeah, they should do some stuff and manage some people. Like that's an obvious one. Mm-hmm. And so I think that covers your questions.
That covers all of it. Dude, this has been so good. I actually have to hop on another podcast with Chris Lee. But man, there's so much to unpack there. Was there anything that you wanted to mention on this podcast that we didn't mention?
No. Closers.io. It's my website. But just doing this for your community. And so, yeah, I realized that I basically answered like 3 questions the entire time because my responses were so comprehensive. But like, I really try to when somebody asks me something, I'm really trying to be like, okay, I got to like give all the detail here, and all the nuance. Because there's never one way to do stuff. There's a lot of contextually dependent stuff, right? And so, I'm always wary of people who are like, here's the one way to do it. It's like, there's a lot of ways to do it. So
especially
trying to give the nuance.
With the team stuff, that was so good, dude. Especially the difference between manager, team lead, and kind of dialing as a notch and just not totally ripping out from that department. So that was fucking awesome, man. Yeah, I'm going to hit you up. I miss your face, man. Hopefully we can meet up somewhere around the world here, but this has been incredibly valuable, dude. So thank you.
Well, let me know when you're in Arizona, dude.
Cool. Will do. See you guys.
Yep.